Hello there! Welcome to the Michael Rollins Show, where today we're talking to CiottiFPV, aka Ahren Ciotti. Before we get into that, I want to just take care of a few housekeeping notes. My podcast is live, so if you would like to listen to past episodes, plus a few other, you can just search for the Michael Rollins Show in any podcast provider that you would like. The episodes will lag by 1 week, so if you want early access, then become a patron. Any patron, any tier, is going to get access to the episodes before they're available to the general populace. So if you're looking for the Ahren Ciotti episode today on the podcast channel, you're going to have to wait a week. So besides that, I'm also opening up my Discord. If you would like to come join the Michael Rollins Show Discord, then the link is in the description. And I hope that you might come hang out with us a little bit. Now, Ahren and I today talk about mental illness. And, you know, when I first started recording this, I thought it would be kind of, oh man, this is going to be sort of a bummer show. And it really wasn't. It was surprisingly lighthearted. And really, I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Ahren. Now, in case you don't know, both Ahren and I suffer from a different set of mental illnesses. For Ahren, it is depression and anxiety. For me, it's bipolar. But what's really interesting is that our experiences are not all that different to a degree. But I think the best thing out of all of it is that our coping mechanisms were exactly alike, which really validates me that, okay, well, maybe I really should double down on these things that I'm doing. So I hope that you enjoy it. And this was a fun one. I really liked it. Talk to y'all in a minute. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Michael Rollins Show. And tonight, as you can see on the other side of the screen, if you were indeed watching this, we have the one, the only, Ahren Ciotti. How you doing, buddy?
Hey guys. How are you, Michael? I'm good, man. You?
You know what? I'm hanging in there, man. I'm hanging in there. It's been a hell of a decade in the last 2 or 3 months. Wow. Last week was a long century.
Yeah, right? Last week was a long
last year, man, longest millennium I've lived through.
For real. I
feel like over the last year, I started using those jokes. And I found very quickly that I was running out of excessively large time frames, right? It'd be like, yeah, last week was a long year. Nah, man, last week was a long decade. Woo, what a century.
Yeah, mental illness will do that.
Where do I go now?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so Ahren and I, or Ciotti and I, are... Today, it's nighttime for both of us because we're both on the East Coast. By the way, would you like his address? No, I'm just kidding. Today in creepy things on FPV. We are going to talk about mental illness. And the interesting thing about talking about mental illness is that it's hard. But both Ahren, I'm going to keep calling you Ahren. Both Ciotti and I have suffered from it in various capacities. And so the thing, first off, if you're struggling, if this is something that you don't want to deal with, you don't want to watch, just turn it off right now. This is your trigger warning, even though I hate that statement. It's just like, come on, Amen. Seriously? Like when I was a kid, it would be like, oh, I don't like that. Now it's like trigger. Yeah. Everybody's seen the lady, right?
That word got taken away from us, man.
Oh man, yeah. Not unlike many other things.
It's true.
So I'm just gonna have to pull myself out of that one. So this is FPV related, but as many of you have probably noticed, I'm tangentially moving into different areas than just FPV, right? Like we've all talked or heard all the great pilots talk. We've watched, Joshua Bardwell and Ciotti and all these other folks talk about the technical aspects of flight. But the experience, the mental experience, the physical experience, the emotional experience of flight is not something that a lot of people have dived into. So that's what we're kind of getting in tonight. So, my dog is very happy. So I'm going to start us off. Now, normally I would let you start off, but I'm going to start us off specifically because, here is, and I've talked about this with Chad Nowak and in a few other places, but I'm bipolar. And Ahren Ciotti, when we were talking, he's like, well, are you bipolar 1 or bipolar 2? And I was like, I don't know. Typically, bipolar 1 is categorized by these long, sweeping arcs, typically through seasons where you get really, really manic and then you get really, really depressed. Bipolar 2, or what they call 2, is kind of an overall classification, is an illness where you don't necessarily do season-long arcs, but you might do month-long, week-long, day-long, hour-long arcs. And the extremes, you don't reach the crazy extremes, and I use the word crazy here, I'm sorry. We got to be careful when we're talking about mental illness. Unless you've been crazy, you can't use that word.
We're all crazy.
Yeah, but we are indeed.
Crazy enough to stay in this hobby. Whew.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. But yeah, so that is kind of what bipolar is. And I mean, it is think of it this way. And by the way, it runs in my family. Like, our family is eat up with it, right? My uncle, who also has it, he describes it like this. He said, most people, if you jump in the little golf cart and you're driving down the road, the golf cart has a governor, right? So if you slam the gas all the way to the floor, the golf cart's still only going to let you drive like this, right? Folks with bipolar don't have governors.
Nope.
And so when it goes sideways, it goes really sideways. And so that's kind of what bipolar is.
Highs are high and the lows are low.
Highs are high and lows are low. And sometimes they're all of it at one time.
Yeah.
So I'll let you, all right, Ciotti, Ahren, I'm just going to call you Ahren. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that works.
You hit me with it. What have you dealt with?
So I have clinical depression and generalized anxiety disorder, and a lot of parallels to BP2, actually, BP being bipolar. I actually did last year a pretty expensive full psychological evaluation to really kind of get to the bottom of some things. And they did not tell me that I had BP2, which was interesting. It sort of triggered some weird, like, imposter syndrome stuff, which was kind of interesting. But a diagnosis is a diagnosis, right? It's not set in stone. I could go take that psych eval again, and it could maybe, on a different day, on a sadder day, on a happier day, right? Mental illness is a very interesting journey. And my personal journey, I actually turned 40 next month. Around 25 or so is when I somebody at the job I was working at was like, "Oh, you don't go to talk therapy? What are you, nuts? You're in your 20s, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to talk therapy. And pretty quickly I was told, like, "Hey man, you got some depression going on, brother." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Oh, that explains some stuff from my childhood." And that's kind of where it started.
How did you feel about your mother? Sorry.
So yeah, that started a very interesting path. I'm 4 or 5 talk therapists deep now. I've been through psychologists, psychiatrists. I've spent 3 years bouncing around on different medications. Last year was absolutely mega for everybody with mental illness. I lost. Right. I got laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, and so the health insurance ran out, so the pills ran out, and
God, that's my nightmare.
And right around that same time, in a conversation with Joshua, actually, about maybe doing FPV full time, I'll never forget what he told me, which was, "If not now, then when?" And so on top of everything else, now for the first time in my life, I was working for myself. So it's been a heck of a road, but hey, that's life sometimes. And today I feel better than I ever have. This year has been amazing. I'm off of meds and onto some other really interesting stuff, yoga, meditation. The new therapist that I'm working with is orders of magnitude more expensive than any other one, but go figure, you get what you pay for. And it's been just unbelievable. And yeah, here I am today.
So I feel like one thing that I should really touch on right now is that you said you're off your meds, and number one, fantastic. Right? Like that is like for folks that haven't taken a lot of these psych meds, they're psych meds, okay? For folks that haven't taken these psych meds, dude, they will mind you in a heartbeat if you're not ready for it. It is scary.
Very, very scary.
Now, and they at time, like, I've been on some stuff where it was so unpleasant. I like called my doctor. I was like, I can't do this. They're like, well, what else is going? I'm like, well, I took like when I first got diagnosed, my doctor put me on. I think it was no, I don't. I think it was. I don't remember what it was at this point. It might have been a Abilify, and that look, my brain was Swiss cheese at this point, right? And I had neglected to tell her that I was on another antidepressant. And so about 2 weeks into this, I, like, looking back on it, I should have been terrified. Because now, looking back, I'm like, oh, wow, that was like, what's it called? Not tardive dyskinesia, but neuroepileptic. Anyways, there's a particular side effect from bipolar medication that'll kill you. And I am suspicious at that time that I was dealing with it because I was walking around like an old man and everything hurt. And I finally called my doctor and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And she's like, well, is there anything else you're taking that you didn't tell me about? I was like, yeah, I think this. And she was like, yeah, you can't take that. So,
I laugh, but I mean, you got.
Dude, it is it. If you can't laugh at it, then you don't need to have it, right?
Very true.
But what I will say is that, for you, because you have clinical depression and anxiety, which those are two names, right? But those names can possibly allow you to not take medication. For bipolar, that's not an option. If and when I come off my meds, and I've over the past couple of years had to come off them once, it's brutal and things go out of control. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, I want to be off my meds too. If you're like me, that's not a good idea. If you're like Ahren, then perhaps consider consulting with your doctor about it.
Oh yeah.
Because
I don't say off my meds as like a good thing, for the record. Like, if the meds had worked, I would gladly be on them. And when I was on them was the right time to be on them. And things change, right? Your brain changes, you change, your living situation changes, and that's fine. My financial situation changed, which is one of the reasons why I had to come off of them. And to be able to find other things to take their place has been pretty amazing. So I'm, for the record, for anybody out there, like, I am medication is great if it works for you.
If it works.
But if it works for you is the key there. Like, you have to be eyes opened about it because they're scary. They're powerful things that are going to alter your brain chemistry, and it can go bad in a hurry. So you got to be careful. You got to really work together with your psychiatrist on it.
It's funny you say that. I had like I said, my family's eat up with it. I have a relatively close relative who recently got diagnosed with bipolar, and that person's father also probably has it, but it's not my place to say that he does. But this person spent, here's your meds, go take them. And they took them for a few weeks, or actually a good 3 months, right? So it was like at the point where it was actually working. And they had just some off the wall, like dissociative, crazy events, right? Going into it. And from my perspective, I was able to sit down and say, oh, this is bipolar. Here's my doctor. Let's go talk to my doctor. But they recently, there had been some snafus with insurance, whatever, and they had been off it for a couple of weeks. And I was talking to them, and they said, I cannot wait to start my medicine again. because for the first time they had felt pretty good.
Yep.
So, once you do find the right one, you stick with it and you hold
Yeah.
on to it.
Yeah, and I had a similar experience where over the course of 3 years, like I said, that's a part of the journey, and like what Michael just said, like it takes months, like it takes 1 or 2 or 3 months for them to actually come in, thus it being a 3-year journey, right? Because it's not just like, oh, I took it for 2 or 3 days and it didn't work. I mean, sometimes that's the case. It was either Adderall or Ritalin that, I mean, it was the first day I took it and I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
That's not the one.
Yeah.
But the SSRIs and some of the other more depression oriented ones, they take a long time, and it's quite the journey. And I had a similar experience where like I found one that wasn't awful, and then all right, let's try something else that's maybe a little bit less awful, and just boom, 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 and it was the same kind of thing. Like, man, I can't wait to get back on. And I stayed on that for a while, and then things changed, and
what was coming off it like? Do you want to talk about what it was?
So it was, it's been a bit. It was a citalopram,
Okay.
which is, or no, escitalopram. I forget how it's pronounced. I forget the generic name of it.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's similar to Prozac. It's
Okay.
very similar to Prozac.
Yeah.
Coming off of it was actually not that bad because you just come very, very, very slowly. I was able to just come very, very, very slowly off of it. And it wasn't doing all that much, as I found out. Like the side effects were some of the big things. I mean, that was really my struggle with all the medication. It was that the side effects were much worse than the benefits. So it actually wasn't all that bad coming off of it. But it wasn't great. It was, it all the old stuff before that journey came right back, and that happened in 2020. So on top of everything else, it was a real party up in here.
Yeah, I can tell you that since I've had kids, so my oldest is 15 now. That is possibly one of the things I have been the most afraid of, is losing my job. And I have been lucky and blessed enough that every time a job ended, the next one picked up almost immediately. And so when you say that you lost your job and then you couldn't take, I'm like, okay, that is to a degree my nightmare scenario.
Yeah. And my periods of unemployment perfectly coincide with the deepest, darkest periods of my depression. It hasn't happened much. I've pretty much always been able to, like you said, just kind of line one up into the other. But there have been 2 or 3 situations where I've been let go from jobs. The first was when right before I moved. So I grew up in New Jersey, and then eventually my wife and I moved down to Charleston when I was in my early 30s, and I was supposed to be able to take my job and work from home from Charleston. And a couple weeks before the move, they said, so we're doing huge layoffs of everybody in our outside offices.
And you're there.
And that's you. So I got to move 800 miles for the first time in my life to a place where I knew no one, moved away from everyone I've ever known in my life, lose my job.
And for what it's worth, like I think there's like 5 things that are considered to be the greatest stressors in life. It's like death, moving, children, like a new child, a job change, and the 5th one, I don't know if it's marriage or something.
Marriage related, divorce.
Divorce or something like that. But like if you're gonna have to deal with it, that is when you will have to deal with it.
Yep.
So.
Go ahead. And then in 2020, it happened again. I at the beginning of the pandemic, I worked for a healthcare company in Charleston. I moved here to Atlanta. I was working from home here for a little bit. Pandemic hit. All of our clients laid off all their employees, got rid of all their employees, and they said, okay, so we don't need any of our staff anymore. And I got let go again.
God, that's brutal. So for you, is there with clinical depression, And maybe anxiety to a degree. Can you tie like a cause and effect together? So, and it sounds like you can, but maybe you can't, which is like, okay, well, I got laid off and then here's the depression. Yeah. Are you able to like establish a cause and effect with it?
There, yes and no. I mean, those things, external situations like that will just bury me, and they will just like I'm powerless against that. And now today, sitting here, I know that, and I realize that, and I wish I'd known that then, because then I went into all of the bad places. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to find another job. All these things, right? Um, Outside of terrible things happening in life, no, it'll come and it'll go. I mean, the anxiety is kind of always here. It's
Yeah,
interesting. I always thought that I had worse depression than anxiety, but I've actually learned recently that I don't. It's really the other way around.
yeah,
The depression just kind of comes in every once in a while. It's just like, oh, you're not feeling horrible enough.
hmm
But yeah, the depression comes in just random waves when all is well. But then, yeah, I mean, God forbid something happen outside of the norm. I mean, it just becomes a guarantee. And you got to have the tools, man. I have more tools now than I've ever had to deal with it. But back then I didn't.
yeah.
And that's
And by the way, that is like the next topic, so we'll get into that in a second.
nice.
Now, how does the anxiety relate? How is it different, right? Because you always hear that, anxiety and depression, they go together, but they're actually two very distinct illnesses. So what is, the depression, I think everybody kind of understands, right? Like there's this dip, you just don't feel good, you feel low. It can be different for a lot of different people. What is the anxiety like? Because I don't think normal people, norms, whatever you want to call them, have dealt with anxiety in a clinical sense before.
For me, um, it really interests me the parallels between intelligence and anxiety. And I mean, you can almost just straight up say, like, if you're intelligent, you got anxiety. Like there's a lot of anxiety and my anxiety is just my mind just never stops. It never stops. It is always going, always, always, always. And that's one of the things that allows me to achieve like really good things in life, but it's also what doesn't allow me to just sit down and relax for 20 minutes and just shut it off and just chill and just think about the present versus constantly catastrophizing about the future and thinking about all the horrible things that happened in the past and like, well, what if that changes the future? What if I can't get past that? And down and down and down we go. And that's something that the meditation has been just groundbreaking for me, in its ability to actually allow me to just shut it off and just give my brain a break from my mind and just allow me to shut it off and just be right now. And the thoughts of the future and the past are going to come, but then I can just let them go.
Yeah.
And it's just been it's been a really interesting couple of months here that I've been doing it every day, and I look forward to it every single day, and it's just helped so much.
Yeah. I have never, I have had a couple bouts of, and I think it would be loosely called anxiety. For me, it was like I was curled up on the couch in a fetal position for like a month at one point. It was like, my mind was not focused on anything in particular. It was just in a state of sheer panic and terror. So I guess in a sense, it was almost like a month-long panic attack. And
Sure.
it was one of the most awful experiences I've ever been through. Now I know, having a very close family person that has pretty extreme anxiety, I have been able to witness and kind of help them walk through. From this is from the outside, right? So I really just, anxiety is not something I deal with from that perspective. But it almost feels like thunderstorms to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the way that the way that I have learned to relate to this person is, if you see a thunderstorm on the horizon, you don't hold your arms up and try to block the wind, right? That you are not going to stop the thunderstorm. And as a matter of fact, if you're sitting there holding your hands up trying to block the wind in a field, you've now become a lightning rod. So when that anxiety storm rolls through, you are now the first target outside of that person.
Yeah.
And so, I have, when being around that person, when helping them through some of this, my job now is just, okay, you know what? I'm not going to stop it. I can't control it. Neither can that person. Right. And so you just kind of have to let it play out.
Yeah. Yeah. And panic attacks are something that I've had to deal with now in my 30s. And I think panic attacks, like if you really want to get an idea of what anxiety is, if you just do a little bit of digging on panic attacks, I mean, that's just when the anxiety builds up to the point where your brain is just like, okay, I need to fight a bear right now, but that bear is invisible and I can't figure out where that bear is. And man, does that trigger a rolling, like exponential thing. And then that ends up in a panic attack, and it manifests in your entire body as your adrenaline dumps and as all these things happen. But yeah, that is sort of like the apex of anxiety for me. It's just this buildup of just more and more and more and more. And my mind just goes faster and faster and faster. And then it gets to this point where it's just like, okay, I'm so wound up that there must be like a threat, right? And monkey brain, which is what we all have, because civilization as we know it has only been around for 100 years with social media and all these distractions stuff, right?
Yeah.
Monkey
brain.
Well,
100 years in 1 century from last year, so.
Yeah.
100 years in 1 century, that's what it was.
So yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I don't so much get waves of anxiety. Like the depression for me really is what comes in waves. The anxiety is just kind of constant. And I'm also weirdly sort of fortunate to be married to someone who also has depression and anxiety. So the two of us get to see each other, and we've really learned a lot from each other in that experience of like how to deal with this and how to like work forward. She had a panic attack before I did, and I didn't understand what it was. When I had my first one and I was able to call her, I mean, that could have saved my life. Who knows? I mean, it's so, it's weird to say that I'm lucky that we both have it, but we got to talk about this stuff. The only way to work through it is to just talk about it, which is what nobody wants to do about mental illness.
Yeah, that's why we're talking now.
For sure.
So tell me, you've mentioned tools. Tell me about some of the tools you found to, really cope with what you've been dealing with for all your life, most of your life.
Sure. The first was talk therapy. Just having someone in my life that like, it was a guy that I really respected and looked up to at the job that I was at the time. Having him say like, dude, we all got, I was in a sales team where everybody I really looked up to. It was a music company called Disc Makers. And I mean, these guys were like world-class musicians. And to have like a bunch of these guys be like, oh yeah, what are you doing? Go now. That was really the biggest thing, because I didn't know what it was, right? I just thought it was me. Why wouldn't I have? Nobody had said to me like, dude, this is a thing. This is what it is. And you have it. So, I mean, that was and that's, there's the 3 stages. The first stage is always identifying, right? Just realizing that something is there. That was, and that's always been the biggest tool. And over the year, but talk therapy, right? You typically don't like go every week for the rest of your life. You'll work with a therapist for a couple months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Maybe a little longer if you really connect with that person, but that's never really been my experience. I've always kind of gotten to a point in talk therapy where my therapist has been like, all right, we're getting time for you to fire me. Like that's the point, right? Like I don't want to be with you forever. Like I want to make you better and then send you out into the world. So that's been one of the biggest tools for me. But and then the medication really was helpful. Medication with talk therapy is a great combination. My not the current therapist, but the one before this explained to me, like, the medication is really important because it'll kind of just bring you down a little bit, and then the therapy can really lock in. Whereas like talk therapy, when you're really manic and you're up here, it's very, very difficult. So the two of them work really, really well together. And then much more recently, I found on YouTube Healthy Gamer GG. Dr. K specializes in addiction, gaming addiction. And he is a trained monk. He trained for 7 years at an ashram and also graduated from medical school, and that is now a professor at Harvard. So he combines Western techniques in this like really interesting way. And yoga and meditation are two things that he really talks a lot about and works with. He works. It was interesting. I guess I've now become a live streamer. Since I've been doing it pretty much every day for the last year. He works almost exclusively with live streamers, gaming live streamers. So like when I found this guy, one of my longtime patrons, Tiago, tipped me off to this guy, and I found him, and I was like, well, I mean, I guess I have to watch. Like, this guy specifically works with streamers, and that's what I am now. So I'd be kind of off the reservation to not watch some of this guy's stuff, and it was great, and it's been really just life-changing. And yeah, yoga can be a little woo-woo to people, but like, it's just exercise, right? And it's very widely understood that the benefits of exercise are huge. I hate exercising. I hate getting all sweaty and going outside. Yoga I can do inside. I don't get sweaty, and I get a bunch of the benefits. And hey, I'm a little bit more in shape. Isn't that kind of nice?
For what it's worth, I mean, I remember that I was definitely of the opinion that yoga was woo, and meditation too, but I definitely have changed my tune on that. And I remember the first time, I think it was my wife and I had decided to do P90X, right? So we were moving through videos. I was going to crush it, hulking out, having a great time. And then we got to yoga. And I remember thinking, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. This has no benefit to me. And it kicked my ass. Like, I remember sitting there. And that is when I realized that simply standing still in a posture is really difficult and will literally destroy you faster than anything else.
Yeah.
So it is like,
right.
Well, you talk about not getting sweaty and whatever. I'm like, yeah, but it's still intense exercise.
Yep.
So,
and what's interesting about combining the two is that the like my typical practice, my daily practice is 15-ish minutes of yoga, and the yoga really prepares your brain for the meditation. Like, meditation isn't something that you just sit down and do. Like, it's a practice. You have to be ready for it. You have to really like practice it every day, right? And what's really interesting is that the yoga, because you're doing things with your body and you're focusing on these positions and these holds, it does exactly what meditation is going to eventually do. It clears your head. It makes you think about what's happening right now. And it really does prepare your brain for then sitting down for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes in the meditation and trying to, take the body out of the equation, but keep going with your brain. So they really, really work well together. It's been fascinating. And 6 months ago, I was like, no way, absolutely not. I'd watch my wife do stuff. I'd be like, you're crazy. Yeah. Put your crystals away.
Well, so similar to you, like some of the tools that I've learned, I mean, medication, like it is not an option for me. I will take medication for the rest of my life. Barring some kind of fantastic medical achievement, which I'm not sure I would trust initially anyways, quite frankly, because it's my brain. Which is, I just want to, that's not to say that you can't trust medicine, because I feel like in today's climate, that's a big statement, but my take on that being, well, I'm going to be a little more careful with some things than others. So, But
Healthy fear.
yeah, it's just kind of like, I think I'm gonna let that play out for a few years, and then we'll talk about it. But yeah, no, the so medication for me, obviously, that's number one. Now, interestingly enough, going back to talking about the right medication, I was actually on they're called atypical antipsychotics. Is one of the primary treatments for bipolar. The problem with bipolar and with a lot of mental illnesses in general is folks don't really know how these medicines work. With SSRIs, serotonin, what is it? Select serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They at least they know the mechanism, right? Which is, you've got this little neurotransmitter, and as the and serotonin moves across the neurotransmitter, and I think that, is it too much or too little starts moving across?
Believe it's too little.
Too little, and so the SSRIs bind to the transmitting. Oh, and I think what it is, as they try to move across, they get sucked back in by the other. They bind to things. So the SSRIs bind to what would have sucked it back in, and that lets them go across. With bipolar, we don't know what it is. As a matter of fact, that what's called the golden standard for bipolar is lithium, which is a heavy metal.
That's right.
And up until it was like the late 1800s, I think, like they just called it madness, right? Like it was just the whole idea of mad were people that were bipolar that were so manic that nobody knew what to do with them. So they basically put them in asylums. And then randomly, I wish I should know the history, but some guy's like, I'm going to try this lithium. And they gave the patient lithium, and it pulled him out of the mania immediately, and was able actually to manage the mania. And that's the gold standard for treating bipolar, and nobody knows why it works.
Yeah.
So for me, like I had taken these atypical antipsychotics for 15 to 20 years. And at the middle of 2019, I had noticed I had these like twitches. And I didn't think much of it. And then my wife, and what's interesting is I had just quit drinking. And my wife would notice that I quit drinking I quit drinking in like March of 2019. And I'd been drinking pretty heavily. And then I had a pretty massive liver issue in like May. And then towards the end of August, I was still like slurring my words a little bit, especially in the mornings. And my wife asked me if I was drinking again. I was like, no, like I'm done. I don't ever want to do that again. And I was seeing my psychiatrist a few days later, and I just mentioned, I was like, hey, my wife says I've been like slurring my speech a little bit, and I've noticed these twitches, and I think I got a twitch in the inside of my ear. And my psychiatrist looks at me and she's like, you have to come off your medicine now.
Oh my God.
And I cried. Like I literally sat there in her office and bawled because I knew how awful it was going to be. And, so towards the end of 2019, I was coming off of a medicine that I had been on for like 20 years. And it was horrible. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. I definitely towards December. And by the way, the whole time I'm still doing this channel, right? And so the funny thing is like, I'm so good at hiding it that nobody really noticed. Like if you go pay attention, you might see it. Like there were definitely a few moments where I had interviews and I look back on it and I'm like, oh yeah, you were not good, dude. You were not good. But anyways, all that to say, so I changed medicines. I went from an atypical antipsychotic to something called Lamictal, lamotrigine, which is actually an epilepsy drug.
Okay. That's why.
Yeah. And it, I wish that I had been on Lamictal from the beginning. And so it was one of those things where at the time it was horrific. It was awful. But getting onto the right drug, I feel like, in a lot of ways, 2020 was one of the best years I ever had. Specifically because I was just more stable.
Sure.
But yeah, so being on the right medicine, it's funny because I've also done a lot of talk therapy. A lot of my talk therapy comes from me sitting down and wondering if my head's on straight,
Oh, sure.
and saying, and just sitting there going, man, this just seems really extreme. Is this bipolar, or is this an actual good decision? And a lot of times I'll schedule an appointment. I get in. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I think it means. Do you agree? And most of the time they're like, sounds rational to me.
Sure.
Every once in a while they'll be like, I don't know, you might want to pull back on that.
As a person without mental illnesses, for those of you out there, wouldn't that be cool to have a trained professional say that?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Have health insurance. You can go to one of these people for like $20, and if they say that to you, that's going to feel pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Or when you get in and the therapist is like, you have really good coping skills. It's like, I win at life.
There is nothing
Yes!
better than a trained therapist giving you a compliment.
Right.
Promise.
Yeah.
You that.
Oh yeah.
My God. You're doing pretty good. You're doing awesome work. Good work today.
It's super funny, and I try not to bring religion into this very often. But we go to this church. My pastor is really one of the best guys I've ever met. And when I say best guys, I don't mean like he's a good person. I mean like he's a very good leader, right?
Mm.
And he's able to teach things very, very well. But at the same time, he sets goals and vision, and he moves everybody towards them. Well, one day he gets up on stage, a giant church, right? He gets up on stage. He starts talking about his therapist and how he's going to have his therapist come to talk to us. And he starts going into how he goes in once a month just to sit down and talk to this person and kind of work through things. And like, I'm sitting there in the audience going, dude, you got balls. Like, you are a pastor on stage at a church in the South. You have balls. But it really is a fantastic way, whether you have a mental illness or not. Even something as simple as, hey, I really don't like this person.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Yeah.
And sometimes the therapist is never going to look at you and say you're a terrible, horrible person. What they might look at you and say is, I feel like you're maybe projecting things onto them, but they also might tell you, yeah, it seems like you need to set a really good boundary, right? And both of those reflections can be very valuable.
Yeah.
But I had recently, towards the end of 2019, started seeing this addiction therapist. And second thing in, he's like, all right, I want you to download Headspace. And I want you to go home and I want you to meditate every day until I see you again. So it's like a week. And I was like, what? You out of your freaking mind? And the worst part, like I said, I am religious. This guy's a Christian therapist, right? Like, I'm like, don't you know that that's like the devil's stuff? I mean, what is wrong with you? And I didn't really think that, but there was a part of me that was like, I just walked into a Christian therapist's office and this guy wants me to go meditate.
I'm out.
What is happening? So I was like, I was paying this guy so much money at this point,
Yep.
that I was like, all right, I'm gonna try it. And I went home, and the next day I downloaded it, I tried it, and what just happened?
Yeah.
What? And I just remember this, like, the internal storm stopped. It just stopped. And it stopped for 10 minutes. And I remember after that, for that, like literally just a 10-minute meditation. And I came out of it, and it hit me that all of the drugs, all of the alcohol, all of the things that I had been trying to find to cope with my bipolar, and this was the first time that it ever worked. And I was looking for peace, and I was dumbfounded, man. And so I have gone back to meditation over and over and over again, and I truthfully need to be better about it. Because there are so many benefits. But yeah, man, it is like, I mean, if you want to try a challenge right now, okay, if you think you're too big of a person to get to use meditation, if you think it's just total trash, then I challenge you, go download Headspace and do it once. Follow the guy's directions. By the way, he's got a fantastic voice. I love listening to that guy, but in a non-creepy way, right?
Sure.
Go try it. Go try it. And if you do try it and you hate it, then tell me in the comments below, which is fantastic YouTubery, right? But Aaron's like, yeah, that was really good, man.
Really, really good thing. I believe it or not, I've actually not been on Headspace yet. I've just been using Dr. K's techniques and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's. I'm so upset that I just wrote it off for so long. Right? It's like this could have been helping me for the last 20 years, but you know what? That doesn't matter because it's helping me now, and that's all that I can control is right now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's wild. It really is wild. And I mean, if you get really into it, you can have all kinds of little adventures inside your own brain. And again, how is that not a good thing? I want to have little adventures inside of my brain, right? For 20 minutes a day, every day. That's pretty cool. Where's the downside?
And then, obviously exercise too. Like I try to get at least 30 minutes of some kind of exercise every day. I'm going to go do the Gamer GG guy tomorrow. I promise. I will do it.
You're gonna dig it. Yeah, Dr.
I will report back on how awful I feel the next day. It's going to hurt. I will add one tool. So the tool that I will add is introspection. I have, okay, well, people hear introspection and they're like, oh dude, I don't know if I can do that.
It's hard to do.
There's introspection is a single question. It's why. But that single question is directed at an emotion. And so if you start feeling something, or after the fact, if let's say you had some kind of terrible, awful experience, maybe you had a fight with your spouse or with your friend, whatever. A lot of times, especially if you're pretty sure that you initiated it, or that your response was not in line with their first question, whatever, I'll sit down with myself, go on a walk, do whatever, and just ask myself why. And I'll just kind of sit there with that for a little bit. And what I find is that all of a sudden, all this giant ball of emotions that I'm feeling, I'm able to start pulling bits and pieces off of it, right?
Yeah.
And, my wife and I had, a few months ago, we had like a knockdown drag out. Like we don't have them very often. And obviously with the pandemic, they've been a little bit more regular. But I got to the point where I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like and that's not, typically when we argue or get into a real big knockdown drag out, I'm like, Urgh. Yeah. But I went on a walk and I walked for a good 45 minutes and I wrestled with that why. And what it finally came down to was I had this outsized response to this argument that we were having, because we were having an argument and then I just escalated it, right? Because I didn't feel like I had control. And it took a solid 45 minutes of just poking at that stupid thing until all of a sudden it started unraveling. And once it starts unraveling, you grab one of those strings and you ask it why. And that is proven to, I have, talking about getting compliments from your therapist and your psychiatrist. I've been with my psychiatrist for 15 years, and she has commented before. She said, she's told me, she's like, you should not be doing as well as you are. And because bipolar is a major mental illness, right? Like it cripples a lot of people. It also makes people very successful, which is different. But she,
illness can be a superpower.
Yeah, and that's the next topic. But yeah, no, she, we got to talking and finally she said, your introspection is probably one of the reasons that you're able to do what you do. So, all right. Enough about
My version
tools.
of that
Go ahead.
is ego work,
Yeah.
which is very, very similar. It's funny you said that all went down when you were taking a walk, because nature doesn't care, man. Nature doesn't care about your ego. Nature doesn't care how big of a bad dude you are.
Mofo.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be on my best behavior.
You're good, man.
I'm trying. Yeah, nature doesn't care, right? You go out in nature and you're like, it's calling the shots. Taking walks, taking long walks, and doing ego work. Most people think of ego in the negative sense, right? Egotistical, but all your ego really is, for anybody that doesn't know, is just your autopilot. Basically, ego is running the show 95% of the time. The other 5% of the time is your actual present being. And your actual present being, that's the real you, right? Like, your ego has all this baggage from every single scar that's ever happened. And that's not necessarily the person that you want to be. And the ego work and the introspection is how you bust through that and pick and choose. Your ego is important because it protects you, but you need to pick and choose which parts of that you want to use, because there's parts of your ego that aren't so great. They're the parts that escalated that argument. And I've been there. And that's been a big key for me with this, with the current therapist that I'm working with, is just getting the ego work done and doing some, and just having an understanding of that has just been groundbreaking for me.
And but, the interesting thing is when you put in the hard work for that, because it's not, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're just going to have this, moment in the sun as you're asking the beautiful question, why? And everything's just gonna be laid at your feet. No, man, you're wrestling with yourself.
Hardest work you'll ever do.
Wrestling with yourself is awful.
Hardest work, hands down, hardest work I've ever done. But in my entire life, every single really hard thing I've done has been the best thing I've done, right? When I meet a new person, I don't talk about what I had for lunch last Tuesday. I talk about the time that I moved 800 miles south, lost my job, right? I mean, it's the hard work is just, that's the juice. And I mean, at the end of the day now, I work super hard all day and I'm exhausted at the end of the day. A, I'm actually able to go to sleep. That's kind of nice. But B, it's the best exhaustion ever, right? Like, if you guys think about a job that you've ever been at that you didn't necessarily hate, or maybe you did hate it, but you were working on a project that you didn't hate and you worked a 10-hour shift. At the end of that 10-hour shift, you were exhausted, but it felt good. Did it not? Right? That's, if you're doing the right hard work, it is incredible, but it's still hard.
Yeah. And here's the one of the hardest parts. It's not like the understanding is the fix. That is, the understanding is the crux of the fulcrum that you start moving everything with. And so, when I realized I didn't feel in control, I had to dive into that again. And why don't I feel in control? And then eventually
feel in control.
You what?
Why do I have to feel in control? Why is that so important?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm not going to go ask that question right now.
Next.
Yeah. Next, let's go. Keep moving on. But yeah, no. So, I think all of those, so, just summarize, talk therapy, very good. Medication, if you need it, very good. Meditation's fantastic. Physical exercise, whether that be just a simple walk or, throwing weights around, or yoga, just exercise.
Yeah.
And then, introspection, ego work, why, however you want to frame it. So those are, it's funny because we actually have the same set of tools, which is hysterical. So
and doing the work.
Yep. And doing the work.
Yeah,
there you go.
What in your life has ever been easy that's also been good? Mm-hmm. Got to do the work.
How much time did you put into the latest FPV trick that you learned? Why would you not put that time into yourself?
Right.
Just to tie it back in.
How long, how many hundreds of hours have every single one of us spent to stay in this incredibly frustrating hobby?
Yes.
Why would anything in life be any different?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So Ahren, but it's not all downside.
Nope.
What are the superpowers of mental illness?
When your brain never stops, you think of some cool stuff. And you also can't help but like achieve, right? Like when your brain never stops and it never shuts up, or you have these things that are chemically imbalanced that you were born with, whatever it may be, it pushes you, right? It doesn't let you just sit back and chill because everything is all good and your life is awesome. It just forces you into this place where it's like, all right, well, I gotta go. And for a long time for me, the doing work and really, so I up until last year, I always had full-time jobs, 40-hour, 45-hour, 50-hour week full-time jobs. And then I would come home and I would hammer on, first it was airsoft, then it was, well, first it was drums, then it was airsoft, then it was motorsports, then it was photography, now it's FPV, right? And I made full-time gigs out of those from 5 o'clock till midnight, or 5:30 until midnight, or whatever,
I
right?
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think
As we sit here at 9 o'clock.
right. And I think a lot of people in this hobby will absolutely get that, because again, to stay in this hobby, you have to be so stubborn and you have to put in so much time, which is, it's so interesting. Like on my streams, almost every single time I try to talk about mental illness, like every other stream, I try not to hammer on it too bad, but like without fail, every time I talk about it, I get a message from somebody on Instagram or Patreon or Facebook. Dude, thank you so much for just bringing that up. I thought nobody talked about it. Boom, 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 boom. And so the people are out there, right? And for me, it was kind of like running away from the negative thoughts, running away from the anxiety, and just forcing myself to be busy and just stay busy, to keep the dogs barking in my head at bay, so I could just focus on, whatever that thing may be. Maybe that's sitting for 8 hours straight ripping photos in Lightroom. Maybe that's spending 100 hours editing a video. So it can be a superpower. If you, I don't know, what's your take?
So yeah, I 100% agree. Like as a person whose brain never shuts off, and on top of it, I had fought my sleep schedule for most of my life. Where at one point I took so much Ambien just to fall asleep. And what I finally realized, middle of the pandemic, one day I just sat down. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to let myself fall asleep. And, all the thoughts just churn up and they go, 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 go. But it turns out they slow down around 2 a.m. And it's pretty consistent. And, so yeah, dude, I sit down sometimes and like, I was actually thinking about it today. I was like, I probably need to build in time, maybe once a day or a few times a week, to just let my brain go, to not feel like I have to capture every thought and do something with it. Just today, I've probably conceived of 3 or 4 YouTube channels that probably have a good chance of being successful. Actually, I don't even say that like tongue in cheek. Like I literally have conceptualized 3 or 4 channels today that if I put the time and energy into them, I think I could make them work. And it's like, God, what do you do with that? Because you can, and the danger is that now you follow all 5 of them. Right. And then you divide yourself and everything fails. And so I know recently the question I've been really asking myself is, what are you going to focus on? What's the next principle you need to establish?
For sure.
But yeah, it's interesting. There have been some studies that have specifically around bipolar and more specifically bipolar 2. So one of the aspects of bipolar 2 is this thing called the hypomania. When you're in a full-blown mania, you are dangerous. And you are dangerous to yourself. You are dangerous to those, possibly to those around you. And part of it is that your every decision-making construct in your head is wrong.
Yeah.
And there is a possibility that at least partially or entirely, you're just not in touch with reality. And so, the symptoms you can see, like when you see people that think they are basically the second coming of Christ, there's a very good possibility that they're in a mania.
Yep.
Folks that, I know one of the other hallmarks of bipolar is like just deciding on a whim that you're going to do something and going, I probably shouldn't use that all in as opposed to
Yeah.
on a whim. I mean, basically, like you were talking about, like there's actually a really good commercial on TV for one of the bipolar meds that shows this lady, like she looks at something and it's a camera and she's like, oh. And then the next picture is her with like 18 cameras around her, right? Like that is what a mania can be like, right? And you make these awful financial decisions, sexual decision, like it just gets bad. A hypomania. Oh, and the final hallmark of a full mania is boundless energy.
Ooh.
You can just go, 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 go. You don't need to sleep. You don't need to eat. You just go. A hypomania is different. Your decision-making faculties are in place. You do not have quite the same amount of energy, but you have far more energy. You need far less rest and quite likely far less food than everyone around you. And so as a result, you enter this state of just fantastic productivity. Now, can a hypomania escalate into a mania? Absolutely. Can a hypomania go bad? 100%. A lot of times characterized as well with any kind of mania is irritability.
Sure.
Depression. You actually can do what I do is mixed states where you get like aspects of depression and mania together.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
That's a fun one right there.
That's woo! Tell you what, man, you would, yeah.
Break out the party bong first.
Yeah. So there. Anyways, all that to say, there's multiple studies that have been done that show that the percentage of CEOs that could very likely be classified as bipolar is far higher than the normal populace.
Sure.
Because of hypomania. Now, I would here at the moment point out that hypomanias in and of themselves are dangerous. At some point, while your decision-making skills are pretty intact, they're not 100% intact. And, you will start making bad decisions and you won't know that you've made a bad decision.
That's the part right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because like people think about the dangers of mania or even the dangers of depression as, feeling bad. Like the dangers are feeling too good or feeling too bad. And I would posit that the dangers of both mania and depression are that you don't make good decisions. Now they exhibit very differently in each of them. But that's how I tend to look at it. And I ask myself a lot, I'm like, you've made this decision or you're about to make this decision, but is it a good one? Like if you just kind of pull back and it's that introspection thing, like, is that a good idea?
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to that?
I will say this, whether it's my makeup or who I am, I don't know. I've always, at the end of the day, I've always been able, even though like my entire existence is just this one giant rush of emotions, there is some little bit of me that is like, it's like an island in this giant sea. And that is kind of where all of my principles live. And so I am periodically able to kind of like look back at the island from the whatever ship I'm on at that moment.
Sure.
And it's a touchstone. It's a reference point. And so I can know what I used to value versus what I value now and determine if that's a bad thing or not. So it's a very, I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
That's huge, man. That's a big deal, man.
I think there's another interesting aspect that's a benefit of bipolar, of mental illness in general, which is suffering. And I feel like suffering is one of those things in modern society where it's like, oh no, you don't want to suffer.
Yeah, ever. Here's a pill.
Ever. Yeah, don't ever suffer. And I would push back on that a little bit.
For sure.
Suffering. Say again.
Life is suffering.
It is, but suffering and surviving, can do one of two things. It can really screw you up, or it can give you perspective, and the perspective, or it can do both, which it can. The perspective that suffering gives you, once you're done with the suffering, can be invaluable for helping you relate to other people.
Yeah, and I think the mental illness just really, just to have those highs be so high and those lows be so low, it just hammers home the value of what we're doing here, right? Just like what we're doing on this planet as these people walking around, interacting with each other, getting on the internet, talking to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what makes it all worth it. And without the suffering, the really happy stuff, the really good stuff ain't going to be as good. Mm-hmm. So how much can you handle?
Yeah. And, one thing I've realized, especially, because we've dealt with not just my mental illness, but a lot of illness in my immediate family, my kids and my wife. And, having dealt with cancer in our immediate family, you learn real quick that even though you're living everybody else's nightmare, it could get far worse.
Yep.
And you sit there and you look at, say, other people's kids who have cancer as well. And you think, we're so lucky.
Yeah.
Right. And when you can,
as well with my mom.
Yeah. That provides such perspective.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Not that mental illness isn't incredibly serious, but it is good to have a little reality check from time to time.
Right.
Does help.
And it's not all bad. Look, we're great. Sure. Oh, sorry. All right. So kind of the last topic for the night. And this one is a little bit heavier. As there is a cost to us from the mental illness, right? Because we live it. We're in our own heads. We cannot escape it. There's also a cost to the people around us, to the people that are the caretakers to a degree. How do you relate? Like, when you notice that cost is there, how do you relate to it? How do you feel?
Today, this year, I now respect it and cherish it and all these amazing things more than ever before. Previous to this year, I took it for granted. Kristen and I, again, both have mental illness that we deal with, and it's sort of expected, right? When in that case, like we have a little bit of a different situation that, like, it's good in one way in that we can kind of understand each other, but it can get very codependent, very, very, very codependent. And I have a super, super, super hard time with that. But B, the mental illness just kind of, it just destroys your ability to really appreciate that. And it just becomes this situation where it's like, you just expect it. You just expect the other person to drop everything and come give you a hug when you're sad, or not talk to you when you're sad, or any of these other things that there's absolutely no way for them to possibly understand that are going through your head that you're expecting of them, right? And that's hard to come to that reality and to realize that you've been doing that doesn't feel great. And especially when it's much more one-sided, right? When I'm the person that's been doing a really bad job with that, that hammers me into the ground pretty good, right? Because there's one person in this world whose opinion that matters to me more than anyone else, and that's the person that I was doing that to. And that feels terrible. But I can't go back in time. All I can do is use that as just fuel to never let that happen again. Or if it does happen, when it happens again, to be able to come to that person and say, I am eternally grateful for the way that you reacted to me treating you unfairly. There's the work.
I know that for my wife and I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that we've turned around, and because of the nature of bipolar, for me, I have to pick up the pieces every year, 2, 3, 4 years, right? Like at some point, I'm going to fall apart. It's going to happen. It is inevitable. But when you add somebody else to that, it becomes really difficult in a lot of ways to like look at what you've done and to look at the, it's like, okay, we're picking up the pieces again. Right. And to just, again,
And
again, and
yeah.
again. I know that, even with, my wife and I now, I mean, we've been married 20 years, and first off, I'm so blessed and so lucky to have married her and for her to still be with me.
Me too.
Because she didn't sign on for this.
Yeah.
Right. She loves me, but man, after the first mania, after the first depression, I would have totally understood if she just pieced out.
Yep.
And, we're 20 years into this and she's still here, and we're still picking up the pieces again. And what you find out is that it actually is, you'll never stop picking up the pieces. It's just that sometimes there's more pieces on the ground than there were a few days ago.
Yeah. Isn't it?
What now?
Pretty humbling, isn't it?
It is. And I know for her also, she's typically target number one.
Yeah.
When things go out of control in here, a lot of times she is the one that it becomes focused on. And like, there have been times when I've been like super paranoid because that comes with it. And just convinced that she was out to get me, right? Because she's closest.
Yep.
And, I'll turn around like a year later and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But it is,
one of the
burden,
more difficult things in mental illness.
It is. It's pretty awful. But the burden for the caretakers is real. And, there's actually, burnout amongst caretakers is a pretty common thing.
Yeah. It's to have people in your life that don't bail is pretty extraordinary. I mean, I'm one of those people, but just to see somebody else do that is it's inspiring beyond anything. Right. And
it's humbling,
very humbling. And it's so special. And it's something that you just can't, you got to try really hard to not take for granted. But mental illness does a hell of a job preventing you from doing that. And, you just got to face it every day. You just got to figure it out and just make it, and just figure it out. It's brutal.
I will say this though, there are moments that, like, now that, my wife and I have been married 20 years, my oldest son is 15, which makes me approximately 7,000 years old, I think. It's super interesting watching my kids relate to it, because for them, I am who I've always been, right? And they know, like we told them a few years ago, hey, Dad's got bipolar. This is what it means. This is why he acts this way. We also told him I was an alcoholic. I mean, it's oh my God. But watching them relate to it now is pretty funny, because sometimes they're like, Dad, rein it in, man. Rein it in. Like, Or sometimes they'll sit there and they'll just be like, hey, they'll just give me a look, and the look says, that's enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's enough.
Haven't had that experience. It for me, the experience is more, I've hidden it forever.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I can hide it.
Oh yeah.
I'm not hiding it at all. At all. Like, I can hide it from all you guys in chat. I can hide it from everybody outside, but little did I know, I was not hiding it at all from certain people and from the people that mean the most.
Yeah.
And that's tough to sit with.
Yeah.
But
it is.
That's reality.
So I will let y'all into my hiding. As I was preparing for this, I've had a couple things over the past few days that just haven't gone quite right? And so I kind of came in today thinking, oh man, am I ever going to be any good? And by the way, as this is happening, I know what's happening. This is not me. This is like the illness is currently speaking to me. I'm a little down right now. Like, things have been tough. I'm not feeling super grateful or super wonderful. Like, I really just kind of want to go lay down and not really do anything for a few days, right? I don't want to be productive. I just pretty much want to go tell everybody to F off and leave me alone. I'm not going to do that, thankfully. By the way, that's kind of like the fight sometimes. It's like, okay, this is what I want to do, but I can't do. All right, just put your foot in front of the next one. Let's keep going. Yeah. So yeah. I am preparing for today. So as everything sneaks up on me, even though I told you a few days ago we were going to do this, we're doing it today. Okay, great. Part of me didn't catch the memo, so I was preparing this afternoon, and I just started getting like anxious. And inside my head, the doubt begins. I don't know that I'm qualified to talk to somebody about mental illness.
Yep.
Am I? Oh, this is terrible. Oh my God, how do I even get myself into these? It got to the point that after I had dinner, which was like an hour and a half ago, I went upstairs and meditated. I was like, I need to rein this in. I'm going to go sit down. This is a tool that I have. And luckily I was able to kind of pull it back in and, but this face that you see, the happiness, the smile, the laughing, like, that does cover up quite a bit under the surface. So yeah, when you talk about being able to fake it.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, but we've lived with this our whole lives. So we've had a lot of opportunities to figure out how to put a smile on.
Yeah. I'll share this with you, and then I guess we can roll out if you want. But so that relative that had recently been diagnosed with bipolar, what started the whole journey for that person to get diagnosed was I get a call from their grandparent saying, I need you to come over. I don't know what's going on. This is not good. And I walk over and I start talking to them. And I watched them for about 5 minutes, and then I just kind of sat down in front of them, a lot like you would do with a toddler. And I said, when's the last time you ate? Oh, I don't know. I'm not hungry anymore. When was the last time the people when was the last time your head stopped? And they were like,
my head can stop?
I don't know. Right. And I said, how much have you slept in, say, the past week? I'm getting maybe 2 hours a night. And when you're sitting down, do you find it's hard to stay still? Like, does it ever feel like there's just like, you got to just get all the words out as fast as possible? They're like, yes. And I was like, you're bipolar, you're experiencing a mania, let's go. So I took jumped in my truck with their grandparent, and I took them down the road to my doctor. It wasn't my psychiatrist, another doctor. And I sat in the driver's seat next to them because I didn't want them in the back. I wanted them in front with me. I didn't think they were a danger, but sometimes you just want to be careful. And as we're riding down the road, I got to see myself from the outside. And literally, like, that person, they were like, at one point, I mean, they were melting down. They had just gone from to, oh my God, my life is and we're riding down the road, and I just bust out laughing. I'm literally laughing. I'm belly laughing as we're riding down the road, while this person is next to me, just effectively considering that they're probably dying. And they looked at me. They're like, "Why are you laughing?" I was like, "Because this is what I'm like."
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But then we walked into the doctor's office. The mask went right on.
Sure.
They were calm, cool, collected. Total, nothing was out of place, right? And then we left, and boom, the mask came off, and I was like, "Oh, that's what I do! Look at that!"
Yep.
So,
A little bit of validation for you.
yeah, it was a pretty fantastic. And then I came home and I looked at my wife and I said, "I'm very sorry." So I just want to let you know, I finally saw it, and you were so right.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
How and why are you still here? And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
yes.
So for the record, your experience today, I've had that experience a couple of times. I've got a little Facebook group called FPV Therapy, where eventually a couple months ago, I decided, all right, I do alliteration with all my live streams. So I thought, therapy Thursday. Okay, there's an idea for Thursday night streams. Great, this will go awesome. Hardest thing ever. Fighting off crying pretty much the whole time, talking about the deepest, darkest things. And yeah, very, very similar experience of, what am I, nuts? I'm not a trained professional. And of course, started off with, hey guys, right. I'm just a dude. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I've been to a whole bunch of talk therapy. I'm going to give you guys my experiences. Do with it what you want. Hopefully someone out there, this connects with them. And I've done a few of them now, and they're the hardest streams I've ever had to do, but they're the best streams that I've ever done. They're not necessarily from an entertainment standpoint or a views standpoint, but I mean, what am I here to do on Earth, right? Like if I leave a little bit of a positive impact on Earth, that's kind of it for me. That's sort of always been the thing that kind of drives me. And maybe that's with great photography or great instruction, driving with people at track days or autocrosses, or maybe that's helping somebody build a rig. But like with the Therapy Thursdays, it's like a very direct, like one-to-one, just like, I did this, I sacrificed, I did something that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and really put myself out there specifically because I think it was going to help somebody. And that makes all of that stress, all of the armpit sweat, all of the everything just so worth it. And when you messaged me about coming on the show, and I was like, I know what I want to talk to Michael about. I don't know if he's going to go for it, because it was a nightmare for me in a lot of ways. But I really tried to kind of break it down, and I wrote a hell of a message to try to kind of sell you on it. And dude, I'm so happy that you were down to do this, because this is it, man. FPV is great and all, but this is life.
Yeah. And I think the important thing is, like you were saying, like, not only does both of us and other people talking about it help other people, it also normalizes it, right? Because whether or not either one of us likes it, there are people in this community that look up to us. And it's not even whether we like it, it's whether or not we even acknowledge that that's a thing. And
well, I don't like it, for the record, but I do.
I dig it. If you would like to, here's my Patreon. And but for real, if we, and I know there's plenty others that deal with it. If we do stand up and talk about it, it normalizes it, right? Especially now, I think, like, the number of unfortunate events, which is what we'll call them right now, and requests for mental health have gone up 5-fold since the pandemic started. People are just now grappling with serious mental illness in their own lives for the first time. And people that never thought it would happen to them, it's happening to, and they're bewildered and they're confused. And, sometimes it's really helpful to be able to stand back and be like, oh, he made it. He's doing all right. Look what he's doing.
Yep.
So
totally.
Yeah, man. So anyways,
I think I are also old enough where we grew up where it wasn't a thing.
No. Oh
I
my
didn't know
God.
it existed until my mid-20s. Didn't know it existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, had heard the word before, but just thought it meant being sad for a day because my dog died.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Had no idea that it was a chemical thing or it was trauma related or boom, 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 like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also really nice to see the generation of kids coming up now being able to get this knowledge in school, right? I mean, I guess you get to see that with your kids. That's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it is. And, I think, and this will be my last point, and then I'll let you kind of give how people can contact you and whatnot. What I would say to folks is that finding mental health care can be challenging. But if you are struggling, if you are dealing with this, if you think you fit into the bucket that we outlined today, then maybe it's a good time to go talk to someone. And there's a lot of resources. I think one of the things I'm most excited about right now is the online, like you can basically connect with a therapist on your phone. And, that is an economic thing to do, number one. And number two, I know for me, for a long time, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to let somebody talk to me about what's wrong with me because what if they get it wrong? And honestly,
interesting.
oh yeah, dude, like, no, man, like, coming from a fundamentalist Christian background, man, dude, those therapists out there, ooh, they're going to get you, teach you the devil's way. Ah!
Interesting.
But it is, don't worry so much about who's on the other end. At first, you'll find out who you like and who you don't as things go on. Just the sheer act of talking makes a difference. So, and it does, you can talk to other people, but it does help to talk to someone that's licensed, that has an education in this. So
I've been trying to break it down even simpler than that lately.
Yeah.
And just say, do something. Just those words, just do something. Do anything, just do something. Start right now, start today, do something. Go to Facebook and join FPV therapy and read a bunch of us that are dealing with it, talking about our experiences. That's something, that's anything. And just doing that one thing, it'll just sort of like demystify it, and it'll take some of the power away and some of the worry away. And then a week later, maybe you'll do a little bit of something else. And then like 4 days later, maybe you'll do something again. And then 3 days, and then 2, and then 1, and then you're doing something every day. Just do anything. Just do something.
Yeah,
anything.
For sure. So, all right. Well, thank you, Ahren. How can people get in touch with you?
So CiottiFPV.com drives to my link tree, which has a million different ways that you can get in touch with me. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, of course. I've got a Patreon page. So after you sign up for Michael's, you can sign up for mine. For my
sign up for his first.
Yeah.
Go sign up for his first. That'd be fine.
His. I stream every day for the patrons. The streams are public. So if you're subscribed and belled and all that nonsense, you can maybe catch a free stream every day, or you're going to have to pay $3 whole a month to get notifications about every single one of those streams. I am doing this full time. It's been almost a year now, and it's been a crazy journey. I'm glad we didn't really talk too much about the business side, because I'm probably the worst person to talk to about the business side, because I just don't think about it. I come and I stream and I see what the people are talking about, and I ask people what they want. And then I wake up the next day and I do what the people want. And everything that's kind of happened, like, it didn't start. I had my job when it started. So it was just for fun. And like one by one, people in the chat would be like, dude, you should start a Discord. I'd be like, okay, how do I do that? Just do this. Okay, I got a Discord. Mm-hmm. And then a week later, like, hey, you should start a Patreon. I'm like, well, what's that? Okay, I start. So it's been this like unbelievably strange, out of control, but beautiful, like natural progression of just letting people support me so that I can be the micro king, I guess. I don't know. I say all the time, like, I don't know what this thing is here that we're doing, but we're doing it all together. There we go. Now we're talking.
So much fun. Oh my
And moving
God.
forward, I'm going to be, I've got fpvinstructor.com, which is going to hopefully be up in a couple weeks. But I have this like 10, 15 year background in motorsports with instructing at track days on autocross and helping people drive faster and have more fun. And I really want to do the same thing with FPV. And I have been through Fiverr, but I want to do more. I absolutely love helping people fly better through Velocidrone, or spec out their micro builds better because there's a lot of junk in the micro world, or edit better or tune better. So yeah, a lot of different stuff going on, trying to figure out what to focus on and just make it work. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
It's a lot.
What's your job? I play with toy robots.
I'm a live streamer that also does all this other random stuff.
Yeah.
Good luck understanding it.
For real. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along. This has been Ahren Ciotti, CiottiFPV. Like I said, go join his Patreon, and if you have money left over, then think about mine. But thank you for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Michael. Have a great day.